Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the series premiere of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, which actually dropped a couple of hours early on Apple TV+. It wasn't supposed to premiere until today, but it premiered last night, so I checked out 2 episodes. It was a double episode premiere, and I want to give you my recap and review, so let's get it going. The first episode was called Aftermath, and it starts out on Skull Island in 1973, where John Goodman's Bill Randa is running from a giant, it looked like a daddy long-legged spider, at some point after Kong took out the helicopters in Kong Skull Island, and before a giant crab rises up from underground to fight the giant spider. He throws a package into the sea containing some data storage objects, and then we fast forward to the Sea of Japan 40 years later, on a fishing boat where a man finds the package among the catch. We then fast forward to 2015, where a very pretty woman of Japanese descent is on a plane and looking at a document just before her plane lands in Japan, and some guys come on to fumigate the passengers against parasites to help prevent a monster attack, though I'm not sure how that works. Like one that apparently occurred in San Francisco, where the woman who is only in Japan now to settle her father's affairs after his recent death lives. On her cab ride to his place, we see that the government of Japan has taken certain precautions against monster attacks, including setting up gigantic missile defense systems on bridges. When she gets to his place, she discovers, quite to her surprise, that this apartment she found out about after going through his desk when he died is occupied by his previously secret other family, who are also quite surprised at her visit. Elsewhere, a pair of scientists, one of whom is a Japanese woman, accompanied by a chaperoning soldier, arrives at some type of dangerously contaminated wilderness site, and they encounter a boy who apparently was hunting, who tells them that the contamination is something they made up to keep people away, before he takes them to a giant hole in the earth that he says the government drilled. Back with the woman from the plane, she talks a little bit with her father's other family, but the conversation doesn't go well and she leaves. Back at the not contaminated site, which does look a lot like Chernobyl looks now, the scientists and the soldier guy set up a bunch of charges to blow yet more holes in the ground, which at first seems to suit their purpose, but which then almost brings some buildings down upon them. As the woman is heading away from her dad's apartment on the streets of Tokyo, everyone gets an alarm on their phones, and an alarm sounds in the street because apparently Godzilla is coming, so everyone heads for the underground, which is apparently a Godzilla attack shelter. When her father's other wife asks if her father was with her when the attack happened in San Francisco, she says that he wasn't, and then we get a flashback to that attack, during which she was part of a school field trip on a bus which went off the Golden Gate Bridge during the attack, after she and some of the students, but not all of them, managed to get off the bus. After the flashback, she's visibly upset and tries to leave the shelter, but is brought back in by her father's other wife, who comforts her. The scientists, meanwhile, descend into a dilapidated building and find a bunch of what would appear to be monster eggs on the ground floor, and along with the soldier who's been sent to keep them safe, they descend into the egg area, because why the hell not? After getting the all clear from the government, the woman and her father's other family leave the shelter, and she declines an invitation to tea from her father's other wife out of disgust, but the man who is apparently her half-brother takes her to an office that his father kept. She seems to quickly realize that whatever the office was supposed to be for, it was a front, and after ripping a chart down off a wall, finds a safe that she's able to get into after entering a code made up of all the birth dates of herself, the half-brother, and the 2 wives. Inside the safe is the container that came off of the fishing boat in the Sea of Japan, which the Randa character had dropped in the ocean 40 years before. The woman immediately recognizes the Monarch symbol on the container, which she previously saw in equipment and uniforms being carried and worn by men who showed up in the aftermath of the San Francisco attack. So the 2 of them take the contents of the bag, which are a bunch of weird cassette tape type storage devices, to a woman named May, who the half-brother thinks can help them find out what's on them, and who the brother was apparently dating at one point, though they seem to have broken up at one point as well. At her place, May is able to decrypt the tapes, but in so doing sets off an alert at Monarch itself because she used an online decryptor for part of it. In another flashback to the aftermath of the Godzilla attack in San Francisco, the woman whose name is apparently Kate unexpectedly meets up with her dad, who had been away during the attack, only for him to head out again to Alaska, where it is said he died in a plane crash. Among the decrypted files, Kate, her brother, and May see a picture of the Japanese scientist we've been seeing standing in a Godzilla footprint, and it turns out that she is Kate and her stepbrother's long dead grandmother, so we've been seeing her in flashback. She and the other scientist and the soldier end up having to make a run for it when all of the eggs that they went down to see hatch simultaneously, and they're attacked by a bunch of critters, and the grandmother doesn't make it out. That was the end of the first episode. The second episode was called Departure. It starts off in Manila in 1952, where the soldier whose name is Shaw first meets the grandmother scientist whose name is Keiko Mira. Back in 2015, the brother, whose name is Kentaro, visits the father's office once again and starts ransacking it in anger, and he comes across Shaw's military file, or a file on his military career, as well as other documents about him, and even a film. Back in 1952, Dr. Mira and Shaw run into young Bill Randa, the other scientist, operating his camera in the woods, who apparently was chasing the same thing Dr. Mira is chasing. In 2015, Kate is at the airport planning on heading home, and she's confronted by a man from Monarch who knows about the decryption that May did for her. She breaks away from him after he essentially kidnaps her, but she's grabbed by his accomplice, and they place a bag over her head while they're driving her somewhere. But she has a panic attack and ends up causing the car to crash. After the crash, she runs off. We then see Kentaro taking the film that he found to May, but she tells him to come back the next day, and then goes back into her place to continue looking at the decrypted files, which she seems to be copying. Kate goes to make a police report, but the cop was sort of unreceptive to her, so she ran off. Kentaro gets home to find his mother ripping up old pictures as a form of therapy, and among the pictures, he finds one of Shaw. Speaking of Shaw, in 1952, he gets told off by Dr. Mira when he doesn't want Randa to accompany them, so he takes off in the Jeep while Randa and Mira continue tracking what they've been tracking, which is seeming more and more like it's probably some form of dragon, and Randa shows Dr. Mira a U.S. battleship in the middle of the wilderness. Kate goes to her father's office only to find that May has gone there probably looking for Kentaro, only to find unknown persons ransacking the place. Then the man from the airport, whose name is Tim, shows up at Kentaro and his mother's home telling him to turn over the files, but Kentaro runs after his mother slips him a picture of Shaw, whose father considered the only family he had left when his other family died when he was young. Randa and Mira enter the battleship, which we learn originally went down 5,000 miles away 9 years prior, but it turns out that at the time, Randa had been on the ship, which we learn when he comes across what would appear to be his footlocker on the wreckage. It further turns out that he's the only survivor of the wreck. Kentaro, Kate, and May all meet up, and May, who has a go bag with money and fake passports in it, tells them she can get them fake passports and they can all take off to escape the people from Monarch, but Kentaro says he knows where they should go as he looks again at the picture of Shaw. Back on the battleship, Randa and Mira come across a whole bunch of corpses, causing them to decide to get out of there, which is soon complicated when they come across a bunch of fresh goo dripping from the ceiling. Kentaro, Kate, and May go to see a now much older Colonel Shaw in some type of facility, and the moment he's told who they are, he takes them outside to avoid some cameras in the facility, and after he tells them that what they were told about their father disappearing in a plane crash was probably bullshit, he cuts off his monitoring bracelet, which apparently he has to wear because he's an asset that's being managed by Monarch at this facility, and offers to go on the run with them so they can find out what exactly happened to their father. While making their way out of the battleship, a giant dragon bat-like creature attacks, and Mira and Randa only make it out because Shaw showed up and helped them escape before the ship fell over. So that was the end of the second episode. So I really liked this premiere. I was a little put off by the whole, we're going to show you a part of the story that takes place 40 years before, but you don't know that because you don't know who these characters are yet bit, which, you know, reminded me a lot of Deadwood. They did the Deadwood approach, you know, from season 1. And I found that made keeping track of what was happening on Deadwood hard because I'm smart, but apparently I'm not uber smart. So I don't know. I don't know if that's something I'm going to like going forward. And not only did they do that, but they backtracked on the backtrack, like she dies, but then they go back to before she died, and at the same time they're showing a story in the present, but the flashbacks have flashbacks. It's very strange. But I did like it because I was able to understand it so far, and I think it's a cool, you know, device overall. I just wish they hadn't like tricked us, you know, by not telling us who the characters were or making it obvious what period they were in. I think, you know, I didn't like that because it's a short-term device. Right now, the jig is up, and the shock value of that is over, and you know, why did they do that? But anyway, I think it's cool that Kurt Russell's character is being played by himself in the present and his own son in the past. The actress playing Kate is not at all hard to look at. She's gorgeous as hell. And, you know, you really feel her pain that she grew up with a father who was absent and now she knows why he was absent a lot. because, you know, not only did he have work outside San Francisco, but he had another family in Japan. So she's kind of bitter, and she's navigating that whole thing, as is the half-brother. So I think that's an interesting, you know, narrative. It gives you something to chew on for these characters. And she's obviously got PTSD from the Godzilla attack in San Francisco, and I think it's interesting how we're seeing that in piecemeal. They don't want to give away the whole thing, so we're going to see more of that, I think, unveiled as the episodes, you know, go on. And I'm curious to see what all the secrecy is about. I mean, it's not like they don't know Godzilla exists, right? The public knows Godzilla exists. But I guess the Japanese cab driver told her that it's believed among many people that that was accomplished with CGI, that there was actually no Godzilla attack. So maybe it's like a disinformation thing, you know, a la Men in Black, where they make up a story about swamp gas, as it were. And they're still trying to keep the secret that these monsters exist. I think that's what we're going to find. I'm dying to know how the battleship ended up 5,000 miles away. Apparently, you know, a monster was involved. They threw it or took it with them. So that's going to be interesting to see. Maybe it was the giant bat creature that picked it up and carried it away. But I thought it was well done. You can really feel her trauma when she has the flashback. She lost a bunch of kids, you know, that were in her charge. So she's traumatized by that. She's traumatized by the attack itself. She's now traumatized by what her father was doing, obviously, which she didn't know at the time. So that's going on. And I think we're going to learn more about the Shaw character, which I think they set up interestingly. And apparently, Mira and Randa get together. So the John Goodman character from Skull Island apparently is this woman Kate's father, and also the half-brother's father. And he had gotten with the Dr. Mira. So that whole thing's going to unfold. And as long as they don't keep doubling back on the flashback stuff and showing the flashbacks out of order, I think I'll be fine. Especially now that, you know, we know who the characters are. They didn't drag it out like they did on Westworld, where you didn't know until the frickin' end that you know who was you know who. So I'm liking it. I'm looking forward to the rest of it. The only thing I would say as sort of a critique is not enough Godzilla. Now, I'm not usually one to say that because I like character stories. I'm perfectly fine with character stories and drama, you know, interpersonal drama playing out without any kind of whiz-bang, you know, from monsters and crazy robots and spaceships and things, which was the case with The Last of Us, where, you know, you've seen one zombie, you've seen them all. I played the game, and I didn't really need to see the zombies every 5 seconds for that show to be amazing to me, because I was really watching it for the story and for the characters, which I fell in love with playing the games. This show, however, while I like the characters and I find the characters very intriguing and well played and interesting, I really want to see me some Godzilla. And they didn't show very much Godzilla. The reason I want to see that is because of the special effects aspect, right? You know, zombies are done with practical makeup. It's not as awe-inspiring as when they show Godzilla trash the Golden Gate Bridge. I like giant CGI set-piece action sequences, and so I really want to see more Godzilla and more flying bat take out cityscapes and stuff. That's why I'm watching this show. I can enjoy the other parts of it, but let's, you know, come on, give me some carnage. I want to see some CGI carnage. Yeah, so that's really it. I really like the premiere, and I can't wait for next week's episode. Of course, I'll be here to do a recap and review once that episode is released. I'm going to get out of here for now, but until I return, I wish you peace and long life.